بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله المبعوث رحمة للعالمين. So now we're at Surah Ali Imran. Firstly, we're going to look at Surah Ali Imran, the objectives of it, and then Surah Al-Nisa, which follows. Then we're going to shift from the order of the MUSHAF to the order of revelation with regard to the chapters of the Quran. We're going to look at two, which is Surah Al-MUZAMIL and Surah Al-QALAM. So here, according to the order of the MUSHAF, uh, written Quran that we have Al-Fatiha, Al-Baqarah, Ali Imran, and then following that, Surah Al-Nisa. As mentioned before, Baqarah and Ali Imran, these two chapters of the Quran, they detail things that are in Al-Fatiha, specifically the way of the followers of Musa, and that is detailed out in Al-Baqarah, and then the way of the followers of Isa, and that's detailed out in Surah Ali Imran. That doesn't contradict the concept that Al-Fatiha is called Kitab, or the mother of the book, or the core of the book, the essence of it, and that it has a relationship to all of the Quran in some way or another. It's just that herein, when we talk about the topics that come up in Surah Ali Imran, Surah Baqarah, Surah Ali Imran, they're tightly related to Ahl Kitab. Of the first objectives of Ali Imran is the affirmation of the Tawheed of Allah wa ta'ala, the oneness of Allah, and the position of the people of the book and the idolaters or the mushrikeen in relation to it, and a warning of taking them as guardians, and also the trickery that may come. And part of this warning is coming up because of what was going on at the time when the Quran was being revealed. There was opposition to the Muslims, and that opposition was coming from the people of the book and the people of Shirk. The second round of objectives are listed by some of the scholars, and that is that there, therein comes up the discussion with specifically with the followers of Isa and the debates that take place with them. Now, more clearly so, that was the position of Ibn Taymiyyah. More clearly so, Imam Zarkashi, he mentions that Ali Imran is a completion of its objective. What objective? He's referring to Surah Al-Baqarah, right? So Al-Baqarah establishes a set of ideas with regard to the people of the book, and Surah Ali Imran comes and complements it, especially issues that may be still in doubt or debate. And for this reason, these two surah of the Quran, they are tightly paired together and interconnected. And what's clear in one of them clarifies what's in the other one, and vice versa as well. Imam al-Baqai, rahmatullahi alayhi, he states that the objectives of which this surah is laid out is to establish and to affirm the oneness of Allah wa ta'ala. So he's making the core of it the teaching of Tawheed. Imam al-Farahi rahmatullahi alayhi follows up and he says that Surah Ali Imran is the Surah of Islam, right? And that is because it establishes obedience to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So, like some of the scholars say, that Surah Al-Baqarah establishes the reality of Tawheed, and Surah Ali Imran establishes the reality of Al-Baqarah. There's different angles by which this is looked at. Now, when we move forward to Surah An-Nisa, what we encounter is that Surah An-Nisa shifts, Surah An-Nisa shifts focus, and it starts to center around the rulings that organize the Muslim community and their relation with the people of the book and their relation with those who are considered to be the hypocrites, right? That's one angle with regard to the objectives. Now, there's a second tier to this. So, Izarkashi, he mentions that Surah Nisa encompasses within it the rulings that pertain to relationships between peoples. And there's two types of rulings. Those which govern the relationship of the believers in Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala as well. And then those that relate to the interpersonal dynamics of the family, of the male and the female, and of relatives, Imam al-Baqai rahmatullahi alayhi, he says that his objective is that it centers around Tawheed itself, just like it was mentioned before already. And to clarify that this is the book that was distinguished and pointed to in Al-Baqarah, right? And is the guidance that is mentioned in brief in Surah Al-Fatiha. Al-Farahi, he mentions that Ali Imran clarifies that the Sharia, that the legislation in Islam, or that the guidance in Islam is set out for the mercy of all of humanity, right? And in brief, Ali Imran comes to organize the Muslim society or the Muslim community and to establish its relationships on a sound foundation and to encourage to the protection of the Muslim community and to discourage uh, the doubts that have surrounded the teachings of the deen, especially those doubts that were cultivated, that were upheld, that were preserved among the people of the book with regard to Tawheed. Now we shift. Surah Al-MUZAMIL is from the earliest of the Meccan sword that was revealed. We shifted from the organization of the MUSHAF to the organization of revelation. How was that the Quran was revealed to the people during the time of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Surah Al-Muzammil, it takes its name from Al-Muzammil, which occurs in the very first ayah. and it signifies the one that is covered up, and this is the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. There's some details of this in al-Bukhari when Imam al-Bukhari talks about the beginning of Revelation. There's no doubt that the first 19 ayat are unanimously agreed upon to be from the Meccan revelation. And herein the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam within this surah is instructed to arise during the night and worship Allah, to have the capacity to shoulder the responsibility of prophethood itself and to discharge its its task. And one of the things that comes up here is that it's showing that the work of prophethood itself and also the work of social change, it demands groundedness. And so that relationship with Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala is one that's very personalized here, right? It's not the because we have a relationship with Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala and it's made clear in our dealings with people. And then we have a relationship with Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala, and it has everything to do with our personalized relationship with Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. That's something that should be clear to us. And so herein, there's the command to tahajjud, to the night prayer. In about the mid part of the night or closer to the morning. And tahajjud was a prayer that was made obligatory in the early days. Specifically, it remained an obligation for the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and it was lifted from the community, right? But some scholars have noted that the idea of designating this time of worship during the night is important for the believers so that they can carry on with the responsibility of da'wah and deen uh, in the light of day. And this is exactly what happens in Ramadan is that people, they take and they deprive themselves of sleep and they attempt to carry on this uh, cultivation of relationship between themselves and Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. And they're doing it as a community during the night after Isha. The other issue that comes up is that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is exhorted to have patience with the excesses that are being committed by those that are opposing him, the disbelievers of Mecca. Right? And this indicates that this part of the surah at this point was revealed during the time period where there was opposition to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So the first part of the surah is revealed in the earliest stage when the Quran is being revealed and the Muslims are not receiving much opposition. And then the later part of the surah is revealed when the Muslims are encountering opposition in the society. Now, mind you, interestingly enough, the surah itself, the first part is encouraging for the Prophet to develop the capacity to shoulder the responsibility by tightening his relationship with Allah. Then the second part of the surah is focusing on developing that quality of patience before abuse and so on and so forth. So the first part of the surah is preparing the Prophet for the reality that comes, which is persecution. And that's something that is extremely important, right? When we look at the surah that follows, which is Al-QALAM, this too was revealed in the earliest periods of Mecca. And it was sent down as well during the time when there was opposition. And it was a time period when the opposition was pretty much harsh. So to be honest with you, it's an early surah, but it's still in the Meccan phase and is in a time when the opposition is harsh, so it's probably closer to the mid phase, even going towards the end part of Mecca, right? So part of it uh, must have been revealed during that time. The type of opposition which the Prophet ﷺ was encountering was the invalidation of the Prophet by calling him, meaning a lack of recognition, by calling the Prophet ﷺ a madman, person that is crazy. So his prophethood is coming into question. And an acknowledgement that the Quran is something that is sublime and high level, right, in terms of being refined, because the Arabs, meaning the Arabic speakers, they had an understanding of the Quran as far as its structure, its presentation, its flow, and so on and so forth. And it was unlike anything that they knew of poetry or anything else. So the Quran here is reaffirming in this surah the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, whereas the people are invalidating. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is encouraging the Prophet sallallahu Allah is encouraging the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam to hold firm as he's being called insane and as he's suffering the opposition, the impact and the threats. And the unbelievers, they're being warned that at the end, there's a punishment that will come for the denial of the Prophet, and that punishment is coming in the hereafter, right? So, the hereafter now, Surah Al Fatiha is said to be revealed. We'll cover that in the next session. But one of the things that we want to note is the way that Surah Al Qalam is encouraging the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and encouraging him by affirming his prophethood, right? Surah Al-MUZAMIL was already laying down the foundation for the reality of da'wah, that the Prophet ﷺ had to keep a close connection with Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala, because what was to come would be a test of his patience and his commitment. And then Surah Al-Qalam itself removes or counters the name calling and the doubt that the people are trying to instill in the Prophet's heart, right? And that is the people of opposition. Right? And they knew who the Prophet was. That's the unfortunate part, because the Prophet ﷺ was known to them. He matured in their community. They knew the character of the Prophet. The Prophet was not someone that was unknown, majhul al-ain, as they say. The Prophet was known, his character was known, his family was known. He was part of the society. But when it came to heeding the fact that he was a prophet, or recognizing that, they did not accept that. They did not accept that. And they stayed on the fence with regard to the Quran. They stayed on the fence with regard to the Quran. So, as the chiefs of Mecca were opposing the Prophet ﷺ, they had the challenge of discrediting the Prophet in the context of people knowing who he was and knowing his character and knowing that he was trustful and knowing that he was truthful. But regardless, because they were people of influence and standing, and because of the impact of their words and so on and so forth, it weighed on the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, no doubt. But as it was noted when the first of the Quran was revealed from Surah Al-Alaq, Waraqa, he had talked about the Prophet ﷺ being pushed away or rejected by his people. And the truth of this statement of Waraqah that was associated with the first of the Quran to be revealed, meaning that Waraqah came to the understanding that Jibreel alayhi salatu wasalam, was communicating with the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And before he passed away, before Waraqah passed away, he told the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that one of the signs of a prophet is that he is exiled by his people. And this is what we're seeing, that process take place. And that is a testimony to the truthfulness of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and his prophethood. That came to be historically is known, is documented. It's not a matter of imagination. So the people, those who were in opposition, they were deprived of the companionship of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam as the Quran is being revealed, and as he's calling them to that which is good and looking after their interests. Many of them later on they become Muslim, but they carry the stain of opposition, right? They carry that stain of opposition, but eventually they come into Islam. And this is one of the reasons why we find in Surah Al-MUZAMIL that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is being enjoined to be patient. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is being enjoined to be patient. He has been exhorted to have patience at the excesses being committed by his opponents. And in this case, you find that it's interesting the way that the sword of the Quran, if read carefully, begin to reveal what was going on in the backdrop. That's why there's a tight interlocking between Sirah, the life of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and his close study, and the Quran itself. So this is an overview. We end at this juncture, and what comes next is Surah Al-Fatiha and Surah Al-Masad or Surah Al-Lahab. Those are the two surahs that come after. Until next time, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh wa astaghfirullah wa atubu ilayh.